So this conference is all about women, young women, older women, and there are actually some things that we have been taught by the church as a whole about women that might not necessarily, actually they do not necessarily reflect the true heart of God. So you have heard me teach before about how the biblical Hebrew only has 5,000 words. And this leaves room for misinterpretations of the original text and assumptions that might not be completely true. So today is, as we prepare for this women's conference, I'm just wanting to lay the foundation for all the speakers that are coming in on the importance of women. I don't have a story of me being a spiritual mom, or that's not what the Lord has me doing today. And so today is that we will uncover truths that some of us may not have known. But to kind of put it into context, I want to read this story by Beth Allison Barr. And it's maybe like 2 pages long. So she says, "Wind gusted through the streets of Salisbury that morning, rushing past in an audible swirl as the door closed behind me. An abrupt silence followed, ringing almost as loud as the wind. For the first time, I stood inside the parish church of St. Thomas and St. Edmund. It was founded in the 13th century to provide the workers building Salisbury Cathedral a place to worship. But the current church dates mostly from the 15th century. What I had come to see was one of the 15th century additions, the Doom, Last Judgment, the mural stretched high above the chancel arch. Sometime between 1470 and 1500, a local artist painted the resurrected Christ sitting on a double rainbow in judgment over the saved and the damned. Vibrant robes of red, blue, gold, and green draped the 12 disciples lined up at his feet. Angels with trumpets and wings welcoming the blessed into the streets of heaven, and scaly demons dragging unrepentant sinners into the jaws of hell. The words, 'There is no escape for the wicked,' made sure that viewers understood their fate. It was a stunning sight, and I don't remember how long I stood there just staring at the image. I finally looked away because I was short on time and there was more to see, and tucked away to the right of this Doom mural where there were more late 15th century paintings, 3 of them, and they graced the interior of the stone arches separating the nave from the Lady Chapel. There was the Annunciation by the angel Gabriel to the Virgin Mary, the visitation of Mary to Elizabeth, and the adoration of the Magi. I stood transfixed, looking mostly at the center image, in which Mary, her visibly pregnant body with her long flowing hair, the symbol of her virginity, greeted her also visibly pregnant cousin, and the faded colors of the image did not dull their joy at all, as they both touched the swollen belly of the other. Not only do they see the miracle God has wrought within their bodies, but the 15th century artist who painted them made sure that all who visited the church would see that miracle too, except that for more than 200 years, no one did see those paintings, only the painting of Doom. According to the official church guide, the walls were whitewashed during the Reformation, hiding the striking medieval Catholic scenes behind a drab coat of Protestant white. For generations, worshipers came and went through this church, not much more than a stone's throw from the soaring spire of Salisbury Cathedral. They listened to sermons, sang hymns, celebrated weddings, and buried their friends. Their eyes would have wandered across the wood beam ceiling and stone walls around them. Yet, until 1819, when someone investigated these small traces of colors in the arch above, no one who had been inside the church of St. Thomas after the 16th century had seen the medieval paintings that were and had always been right before their eyes. It struck me how much women in the early church are like these medieval paintings in St. Thomas. Just as Deborah was called by God to lead Israel and did so successfully, with wisdom and integrity, Jewish women served their synagogues in leadership roles. Should it surprise us then that women in the early church led in similar ways? From women disciples like Mary Magdalene and Joanna, who traveled with Jesus and learned from him, showing up when the men were nowhere to be found, ministry couples like Priscilla and Aquila, in which the wife took the foremost role. Women had become forgotten. And just like this cathedral that had been whitewashed, where you couldn't see the paintings of Mary, you couldn't see the paintings of the angel coming to Mary, Mary and Elizabeth, where the women had been whitewashed off the church, off the cathedral. That is what has happened in the church. And so we want to see women, and we want to see the intention God had and still has for women. That women are not inferior. That's one. Now let me stop right here. You're going to hear some things that are probably going to challenge a lot of your beliefs, especially the older women. Some of these things might be hard to hear. I am just reading in the language and the context of Hebrew. So ask me questions. Please don't stone me. I don't think that would be fun. Okay, so let us first turn to the most foundational scripture that we use to teach women about the hierarchy of God's creation. Now, if you have questions, that's fine. Just don't walk out in the middle of it. So I want to ask the Holy Spirit to please show us what he wants us to see individually during this time. So let's go to Genesis, if you have your Bibles, chapter 2, verse 18. And it says, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him.'" Now I have the NLT version, and I meant to bring my ESV Bible, and I forgot. But it says, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him." So the Hebrew word used for helper, and here I go on my board, the Hebrew word for helper is azer. Now, azer has two forms from one root word. So azer is the word used in this context. And you have a second word that's very similar to it, which is called Ezra. Both of these mean help. Azir and Ezra, that's weird. They are used differently. Yes, we have help. Why is this thing like flopping around? And we have help here. Okay, the difference is this word here, Ezra, is often used to describe military assistance or support, which usually, at least in 8 of the times it's referenced, was proved ineffective. So like a military help that it was proved ineffective. When used in divine aid, it is found in an affirmation such as in the Psalms. So when David says, you have been my ever-present help in my time of need. And he's talking about, like, if we look at the scriptures from when he was hiding in the caves, this would have been the word that he would have used in that context. So then, with Azir, it's different. It is frequently used in a concrete sense to designate the assistant. As to the source of the help, the word is generally used to designate divine aid, particularly in Psalms where it includes both material and spiritual assistance. Now think about that. Can I have that regular microphone? Thank you. Okay. So Ezra is a military help. That's what I meant to write down there. So this is more of like military aid. And Azir is more of like a divine help. Now, this word is only used, I think it's this word, in the forms referring to God as helper, except in Genesis, where it is used to describe woman as the helper. But I want to continue about what it says next. It says that is suitable for him. Suitable is the Hebrew word neged. And this one word, remember how we talked about one Hebrew word can mean an entire phrase? Okay, so this is suitable for him. And I'm not going to write that down because you get that. So that word is suitable for him. And just like Ezer and Ezra has a root word, neged also has a root word. And the root word of neged means tell or make known. So at the root of this word is tell and make known. And this is important to know. Tell and make known. Ezer, a helper, right? To administer, I'm just going to put admin, divine help. So we're going to cut this one out because this is not the one that is being used in Genesis. It's this one. Now, neged has two other words, or there's another word for neged, and it's nagid, which is N-A-G-I-D. That is not it. This means ruler, leader, captain. So when you're studying, remember how we said about when you look at a word, it could be the difference of the dots and the dashes? That's what this is in the Hebrew. I didn't write the Hebrew down when I was studying. So it's nagid, which actually sounds pretty close to nagid. The word nagid before is the word used for the phrase suitable for him. This word is very infrequently used in an inferior way. In other words, if you can find a text where it is used in an inferior way, it's going to be used in the sense that this failed. This person suitable for somebody else failed. So if we were to take just that, to administer divine help, tell, and make known, just those things. And the fact that this is the root, let me back up. So this is the root word. But the actual usage of this is before. So tell, make known before to administer divine help. So when we read it in the way that it is written in the Hebrew, what that verse would sound like would be like this. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper to deliver divine aid before him, one made of his flesh and bone." Now that sounds a lot different than what we've heard. But if we turn, we're staying in the first 3 chapters of Genesis. So if you turn to Genesis 1, verse 26. And let's see what God says about Adam. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness." We all know what the word for man is, right? Adam. However, in this context, the word Adam is used to describe humankind or human beings. It is not in a masculine, singular form to mean just man, as what we say man. it is used to describe human beings. It does not even become the proper name for Adam until Genesis 2. So let's continue to the next verse, which is verse 27. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Now here we see that God created humankind in his image. And the word male and female is used only to separate between the two genders. That's all it was meant for, was to separate between the two genders. It is the same word used to separate female and male, or female animals from male animals. The same exact word. So now we are starting to see a different picture. God made male and female to bear his image. Both are referred to as Adam in the earliest text in Genesis 1. And we can see that she is a helper to deliver divine aid before him. And now let's see the tricky part. This is the part where people tend to get a little squirrely. This is the hierarchy. So let's go to Genesis 1:28. Then God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it, reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground." We see here that God gave this command to both woman and man. It was not given to man, it was not given just to man, but to woman as well. It is in the pre-fallen state, sin has not come in yet, that God gave them this command. They were not to subdue things as in killing things, eat them, become tyrants. That wasn't what he meant by subdue. What he means in this version of the Hebrew word subdue means to cultivate his creation so that it may thrive. And it was a command given to both. They are not treated as different beings in terms of their status or their function. Both are made in the image of God. Both are blessed by God. Both are given the responsibility of ruling the earth. Both are given the fruit of the land for their enjoyment. They are viewed as equals, partners, and co-rulers of God's creation. You see no statement of privilege of being the first one made. Nothing mentioned about headship or gender roles. They are both called together to administer God's own life-giving rulership to the earth. Now, if you're like me, that may leave you with questions about why are there two different accounts of man and woman between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. So when we read Genesis 1 and 2, we need to read it like we do the Synoptic Gospels. I want you to think of it in terms of Synoptic Gospels. They are telling the same story but from different perspectives. Genesis 1 is like an airplane view of the story. So you get this oversweeping overview, right? This oversweeping view of the story of creation. And chapter 2 is more personal. And we see this because the details are different. We see how Adam is formed from dirt, which we learned weeks ago was more like a mud. We see him breathing the breath of life into Adam. We see God giving him a home, placing him in the garden. We see God giving him everything he needs to survive. And we see God giving him purpose, which was to care for the garden. Then we see that Adam shouldn't be alone. And this should make sense to us. It should just be so obvious. Man should not be alone. Did God make anything by itself? Did he make one tiger, one elephant, one bumblebee? No. It would have not been good for any of those species to be alone. And it was no different for man. Adam is incomplete without his partner, and God sees this. He brings the animals to Adam, and he allows him to name them. Yet Adam still cannot find a partner suitable for him. As I was writing that, I was kind of thinking, I was like, Adam never found something suitable for him. And then I thought, wouldn't it be weird if he found a gecko, like, suitable as a helper for him? Or, I don't know, a monkey or a tiger? I just thought that's really weird. I don't know. That was just a thought I had as I was writing down my notes. So let us go to Genesis 2, 18. Wait, am I back there? Okay, I am. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper." I know I've said this, but I'm making a point. "I will make a helper who is just right for him." And this is such a hard point to make. This is why I'm going back over it again. This word helper is not an assistant. It's not an assistant as what we would see in business. It's not an assistant as what we would see in a chef's assistant or a teaching assistant. This word assistant is one which God uses to deliver divine aid, someone who contributes to completing a task or accomplishing a goal. That is why she, we, her, is referred to as Ezer. She is the help. Listen to this. She is the help delivered to him by divine aid of God. Ezer in the Old Testament is often referred to as helper and protector of Israel. How many women in here would say that they are protectors of their families? How many of you would fight something if they came after your kids? What about if they came after your husband? Yeah, there's a reason. When Israel is in trouble, they can count on God to help them. So where do we see this word, this divine help, to administer divine help? I'm going to give you these scriptures. You can write them down, and then you can go back and read them later, or highlight them if you want to. So the first one's going to be Deuteronomy 33:29. It says, "He is your shield and your helper, Ezer, and your glorious sword." So this word, anytime you hear me say the word helper in these verses, this is the word that it is using. Hosea 13:9, "You are destroyed, Israel, because you are against me, against your helper, Ezer." Psalm 70, verse 5, "But as for man, I am poor and needy. Come quickly to me, O God. You are my Ezer and my deliverer." Psalm 121, verse 1, "I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my Ezer come from? My Ezer comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth." Now don't take this out of context. This is not saying that Eve is Adam's savior. So I'm not going there. That's not what I'm trying to say. But she is not his servant either. The task that God gave Adam is a task that Adam cannot complete on his own. He needed a helper suitable for him, suitable for the job given to him by the Creator. He needed a partner to equally share the work given him by God. And we see this in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, when it says, "They shall become one flesh." So far, we have not seen that man is given a special command over woman. What we do see is that he is seen as incomplete and lacking without her. But don't let this get to our heads, because I'm not done yet. So if we go to Genesis 3 is known as the story of the fall, right? And here we see all of God's hard work being undone. We see unity and harmony being undone. So in Genesis 3, we see a serpent that seems to appear onto the scene, and it seems like he came out of just thin air. Like, where did it happen? I will have a little interesting tidbit. Rabbis believe that all of this happened in one day. So Adam was made one day, and all this is in the same day. Adam, Eve, the fall, one day. That's what the Jewish rabbis believe, which to me is crazy, but we don't know for sure. So, all right. So here comes the serpent. He creates all kinds of chaos, confusion, and doubt. He sows the seed of doubt into Eve. Sorry, it's just us. I just noticed it says he sows the seed of donut. So I had to look at my notes for a minute. He sows the seed of doubt into Eve. She gives in to the temptation to be like God concerning the knowledge of good and evil. She desires to be independent of God. But Adam is not absent. He is standing right there with her. And we see this in Genesis 3, verse 6. The woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted the wisdom it would give her. So she took some of the fruit and ate it. Then she gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it too. How many of y'all have seen those videos of Eve standing over there at the tree by herself with the serpent eating the apple, and then here comes Adam just like, what's going on? What's happening? No. He was with her. He was with her. He is standing right there with her, and we saw this. Adam joins in her rebellion. They hide. They are ashamed when their eyes are open. And then when they are confronted by God, Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent. There is no longer unity. There is no longer harmony. The oneness that the Lord created between Adam and Eve has now been broken by sin. The oneness that Adam and Eve had with God has now been broken. So let's fast forward to Genesis 3:16. To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. The word for rule in the Hebrew is the word mashah. And it does mean rule, as in like a king would rule over or have authority in ruling over a subject. But it does not mean dominion. Those are two different words. In English, it seems very close, right? Like to be a ruler means you have dominion. But those words are two very different words in Hebrew. And what is one thing that we see? We see that this desire, your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. This did not happen until after the fall. So why doesn't God have man rule over woman before the fall? Because he lacks the capability of fulfilling his mandate without her. Because she is his partner. One human ruling over another is not the ideal situation, and it is definitely not the ideal of the garden, but it is an undoing of it. When it says that your desire shall be contrary to your husband or shall be toward your husband, but he shall rule over you, this is what the intent of the text is trying to convey. That this is not the way the Lord wanted it to happen. Two people fighting over headship. The word for desire. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband. This word is used 3 times. 3 times. And scholars debate back and forth. There's 2 minds. It's a very difficult word for them to understand because it's only used 3 times. One is in the Song of Solomon, and we know why it talks about desire in that book. The other one is in Genesis 4:16, where it says God is talking to Cain. Where's that? Did I say 4:16? I didn't mean 4:16. I think I meant 4:6, right? 4:7. He says, you will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master. Now, again, I have the NLT, so you don't see the same word. But I think it's in, does anybody have a King James Bible on them, or New King James, or an ESV? What's yours say? In verse 4, or chapter 4, verse 7 of Genesis. So that word that uses in is that the King James or New King James? King James. So that word for desire is the same word that you see here when God is talking to Eve, when he says your desires shall be contrary to your husband. And so what he's doing when he says, when he's talking to Cain about desire, what we see here is just as sin aimed to take advantage of Cain's anger, God foretells the breakdown of harmony, that the woman will desire to disrupt the equality in their relationship, turning it into one of servitude and control, while the sinful husband will strive to exert tyranny over his wife. So he says to her, you will have pain in childbirth. And then he says, your desire shall be contrary to your husband or toward your husband, but he shall rule over you. In the garden, there was no who's ruler. There was none of this. But after the garden, there's a lot of this. And he's telling her, this is how it's going to be. You're going to want to be in position of authority, but he's going to rule over you in a tyrannical way. It never was meant to be said in a way of like, he's going to rule over you and you have no say over anything. That is not how God intended it. That is a consequence of the fall from the garden. And this is one of the things that I think is so important for women to grasp and to understand. Because if you feel like you have to be under constant submission in a way that we've been taught submission to be, then what if you feel led by God to do the work of the Lord, but your husband doesn't want you to? What do you do with that? Is it a sin to not work for the Lord? But it just causes a friction, right? Causes a friction. Because in the beginning, man and woman worked together. She was his divine aid. He couldn't do it by himself. He needed a helper. There was no division of, well, I was made first, so I rule first. If that was the case, then the animals would be ruling over Adam. But they don't. Because it wasn't about who was made first. And I think that's why we see an attack on marriage. Because this is what the Lord showed me. Marriage, when we get married, it is the closest we can come to the way it was in the garden. When we are married to somebody, we become one with that person. They were one. We become one with that person. And we are as close to the way that God created us to be, male and female, than we are at any other time. Now, there is something powerful in that, because if Satan wanted to cause disunity in the garden, why wouldn't he want to cause disunity outside of the garden? If he knows that marriage is the one way that we can experience unity in the way that it was meant to be, pre-fallen state, then of course, why would he not want to disrupt it? He's going to want you to feel like you have a say, and you to feel like you have a say, and for him to feel like he has a say. When it says for us to submit, it's submission to each other. It's not me submit to him and he doesn't have to do anything but submit to God. He does have to submit to God, but he also needs to submit to me because we are one. That'd be like, I'm really trying to get this point across. That would be like me having an arm, and the arm doesn't have to submit to my body, but my body has to submit to my arm. Well, how well is that going to go? I mean, I can't really, if my arm is just wanting to do its own thing over here, I mean, does that not sound insane? Does that not sound crazy? Like it's not even possible for that to happen. But here's the thing, this isn't even used with children. It doesn't say, moms, submit to your children. Fathers, submit to your children. It tells the children to honor thy mother and father. But the submission, the way we've been taught submission, is submission to each other, because that's how it was in the garden. And now, the last thing I want to say is to anybody in this room that has ever been divorced, because I have been. When Adam and Eve became ununified, they were no longer in unity. And we can see they weren't, because what happened? He blamed her. She blamed the serpent. If you're blaming somebody, you're already out of unity. You're being accusatory. And so they are no longer in unity. God did not leave Adam in the garden and kick Eve out. And he did not leave Eve in the garden and kick Adam out. He did not send either one of them straight to hell because they broke the way in which he created them. He did what he could to bring them back together as husband and wife. And was it ideal? No, but it was in the way that the Lord deemed it to be in a fallen world. And what we have to understand is we cannot pass judgment. There may be women that come in here this weekend who are divorced or who are going through a divorce. And we cannot pass judgment on them and say to them, oh, you know what? You are going through a divorce and you are completely out of the will of God. And, the only thing you can do is get married and go back to him, or you're going to live in sin forever. Whatever it is, that these things that we tell people, because they're hurtful and they're not true. To take something like that, to take a context or something that the Lord speaks about as far as marriage and oneness and who women are and who men are, and to put an unnecessary burden on a young woman who has no control is not fair, and it's not showing the love of Christ. And so we have to look at this and say, look, there was separation in the garden. And there is separation now. And is it great? No. Is it ideal? No. Is it sinful? Yes. Does it hurt the Lord? Absolutely. Does he use it, and can he use it for the good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose? Absolutely. And the second that we cast people out because it doesn't look how we think it should look, we are not acting like Christ. Because he didn't kick just one out. He removed them, yes, from his presence or from the garden. But it wasn't because he didn't want to be in their presence, because he still was with them. But it was because he had a plan to save them. And there's a plan to save the other women too. So, what we have seen is that marriage is one of the ways that we can experience what life was intended to be like between male and female in the garden. Now, if you go home and say, Melinda told me I don't have to submit to you no more, I'm going to be mad. Because you still have to be in submission to your husband, and your husband needs to be in submission to you. But it should be an equal submission. And And this is a text that is very difficult to teach. It's very difficult to understand. And it's something I've been dealing with for, about a month now. Karen knows that I've been studying this, and I was actually just studying it for my own self, not really thinking about ever teaching it. And so it's kind of hard to put it all into concepts and that are easy to understand. But what we have to do is we have to read the Bible in context. We have to understand the language. You cannot pick out one word and just say, oh, because it looks like that's what we did, right? Looks like we were like, oh, this is the word this means this means that. No, what does it mean in the context of the sentence? What does it mean in the context of the entire chapter? How is that word used in all of the other scriptures that the word is in, right? Looking at it and going, hey, why is this different? Why does it look like this? Why is it here? What does that mean? And if you look, what you will see throughout the entire Bible, story after story, especially in the New Testament, especially in the writings of Luke, who understood this and tried to bring this point home, you will see man and woman, man and woman, man and woman. You will see Elizabeth and Zachariah. You will see Simeon or Simon and Anna. You will see in Acts, you will see Priscilla and Aquila. You will even see at one point where it's Peter and his wife. You will see these stories throughout the Bible where you see man and woman. Right? You'll see Mary and then the women at the tomb, and then you'll see the men disciples. You will always see that God always goes to man and woman. And usually a woman first. I think we're just more aware. But that's just my personal opinion. So if anybody has ever had anything, if they've ever struggled with that whole feeling like you're inferior, maybe it be because it was something that you learned or something that the church learned or the church taught you, or maybe a mentor that taught you that you were inferior to man, maybe it was society, whatever it may be. If anybody ever felt that way, please make sure you come on up. We can all pray together. It's kind of a different and new thing to view yourself as your husband's equal and not your husband's servant, especially in today's day and age where it's very much taught that the man is above you, you are below the man, and that is where we sit.